We've been told our memories are inside our brain, but what I found was that they're in our field. And because they're stored in the field around you, they become the lens that you look at life through. There's specific areas, like every time you have a sad experience or feel sad, that information gets laid down off the left shoulder. There's like file drawers for different emotions. I'd hit this wonky area and all of a sudden the mail slot would open and it would drop in a note that said something like sadness, age 10. And I don't know where that came from.
This gal, she was born with fingers missing on her hand. And her mother, while she was pregnant with her, had a saw accident and lost the same exact fingers on her hand. And because of my deep conditioning, this is the kind of proof that I have needed that says there's no quote unquote genetics.
I've come to the conclusion that most of what we suffer from, really any ailment you can think of, is actually...
Use code Kelly Brogan for 15% off your first purchase at the Biofield Tuning store. Not valid during sales. Exclusions apply.
Hi, and welcome back to Reclamation Radio. I am Dr. Kelly Brogan, and today I sit down with my friend and esteemed colleague, Eileen McKusick, who is a researcher, writer, inventor, practitioner, educator, and all-around fabulous gal who has been studying the effects of sound on the human body and its electrical system since I was in high school and has subsequently founded the Biofield Tuning method and is also the founder of the Biofield Tuning Institute. She has conducted peer-reviewed research on outcomes that have been achieved through biofield tuning, and she's written best-selling books where she depicts the maps of the energetic dimensions of the human body and how we can decode the body's expression of symptoms and syndromes through sound. So in this episode, which I recommend that you watch on YouTube if you have that opportunity, perhaps in addition to listen to elsewhere, you will enjoy the experience of my cat during a demo that she offers with her calibrated tuning forks, where you can very clearly see the effect of these tones on sensitive creatures. And in addition to a demo, we talk about how it is that you can be sure that your energetic field is what is holding information, that our thoughts are not in our minds or our brains, and that the shift to conceptualizing the human as electric is the only way that we can explain the transmission of information. We also talk about how you can bring very practical ways that you can bring coherence to your field and how you can start to dabble in the world of tuning forks, whether it's as an aspiring practitioner or as somebody who is interested in learning this language that your body is expressing. So I hope you enjoy. Welcome, Eileen, to the show.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm so happy to be here.
So you and I are in a VIP collegial group, and somebody posted a video this morning in the group, and it was like a social media video about how churches were unlikely to have ever really been designed for worship, right? And instead, in each city, if I'm paraphrasing this correctly, but in each city, there is like a Schumann resonance-based tone that the church's infrastructure is meant to resonate in harmony with the other similarly elaborate structures in service of like energy generation to wake up a city, right? And it was just such a good summary of so much of what we're learning about, alternative perspectives on history. And you were tagged in the video. And of course, all of us thought of you in the group because you are such a powerful ambassador of this frame shift, this shift in paradigm, and this, it's like at once a remembrance, like so many things. It's like at once a remembrance and also a meaningful evolution and like marriage of so many seemingly disparate concepts. You are the one, I think, who is anchoring this reality that is undeniable at this point, that like we live in an energetic, vibration-based, resonant realm, and it is largely unseen and sometimes even unheard, but for the most part is informing our experience of matter, right? And you not only have experience with that clinically, personally, intellectually, pedagogically, but you've really founded, like in so many ways, the movement towards this more elegant reality. And I love being able to invoke your expertise. So having this conversation is super pleasurable. And I want to start out with, I guess, a little bit of a provocative question, shocker, because I think many of us want to believe in the unseen, right? We get it on a lot of levels at this point. Like we understand that there are energetic forces, we are energetic beings, and that there's more to the story than the material. But often when it comes down to how we live behaviorally, and maybe even how we decision make, and maybe even how our fears can get hooked, we're still biased towards what we can like touch and move, right? Because of our material conditioning. Maybe this is just me because of my allopathic indoctrination and like only what is measurable is real kind of a thought form. But I wonder, like at this point in your journey, how real relative to the material is the vibrational realm? Like, is it more real to you? Does it take precedence? Or do you sometimes sort of live in both worlds? Like how does it manifest for you in terms of like shedding the materialistic programming?
That's a really good question, Kelly. I think recently I said to someone that as a consequence of my ever ongoing bodywork tuning, honing kind of path that I'm on, that I felt as if my body was turning into music. And I was starting to really experience myself inwardly as flowing music. And that is a consequence of many, many years of getting the noise out of the signal, noise that has been created by our material reality, even our language. The English language has nouns. And so it programs us to think of things in terms of things. Whereas the Hopi language, for example, has no nouns. Everything is viewed as a process. Which in reality, everything is a process because everything is essentially flowing waves in space when it comes right down to it. And so I think a big part of why we're so trapped in this material perception of reality has to do with our language, our conditioning. I saw a poll not that long ago that asked people if they'd ever had a visceral experience of unity consciousness. And the amount of people that replied yes was astonishingly small. It was under 10%. And so we've all been very conditioned and programmed to see stuff as stuff. And even quantum physics, when we're invoking the word quantum, which I don't use, is talking about the tiniest particles. But really, there aren't any particles. Particles are an artifact of human perception. And so I would say for me, the idea that everything is just waves in a fluid medium has moved way beyond theory and into my experience of my body, my life, certainly the work I do. I mean, I do tuning fork healing at a distance. Like, you don't get more wavy than that, you know? So I would say I'm living solidly in that vibrational cosmology.
Which means that when you encounter something phenomenological in your reality, that's one of the first things that you consider, right? Is what is the vibrational signature of what's going on here? You talked about, I heard you, we just spent the weekend together at the Limitless event, and you said this beautiful phrase, which was in reference to your fluency in the language of vibration, right? But you don't have a history as a musician, as far as I know, right? Like, it's not like you came up in this world as somebody who spoke that language, you know, in terms of your training as a violinist or a singer, even in the classical sense. But you've developed this fluency over time by paying attention to, observing, and feeling, perceiving vibration in the world around you. So I'd love to to sort of tap into your gift? Like how is it that you came upon this language that you then began to share with others and train others in at the scale that you do?
I first started using tuning forks therapeutically back in 1996. So it's almost 30 years now that I have been using tuning forks like I'm a bat or a dolphin. I bounce sound off of people and I listen to the ping back. And in that ping back, there's huge amounts of information. And of course, in the beginning, I had no idea what was going on. I was very surprised that if I held a vibrating tuning fork over someone's shoulder that was sore, that it produced a very different tonal quality than the other shoulder, which didn't hurt. And over time, I realized that the body gives off very high frequency, low amplitude waves. And a tuning fork, an aluminum tuning fork, gives off many, technically infinite overtones and undertones. And what is happening is that these invisible, unheard waves that are coming off the body, which we all sense, right? Everybody gets a good vibe off of somebody or a bad vibe off of somebody or good vibe off of that meal. I remember being handed a meal when I was at Disney World and just not even eating it because its vibe was so bad. And I'm like, that is not even food. And it's pretending to be food, that it was giving off a vibe. And so we all know that things give off vibes. We know that. We don't need a scientific explanation for that. We have a felt known body sense of that. But what the tuning forks did was provide an opportunity because those very high frequencies intersect. And then that intersection of information precipitates down through the octaves into the hearing range. So the tuning forks actually make these inaudible waves audible. And I've learned over the years that every single emotion produces a different kind of waveform and it produces a different kind of sound. And they're very easy to differentiate. In fact, and the way that I figured it out is just through my own somatic knowing of my own emotional tones, right? So I would hear a particular tone and be like, wow, that sounds sad, or that sounds angry, or that sounds frustrated, or that sounds like fear. And discovered that there was this whole language of vibration that really, you've seen those memes, right? That the universe speaks vibration, and it really does. And through the course of my explorations, I discovered that not only do humans all speak the same vibrational language, but animals and plants do as well. So the fear for you and I has a pulsing quality. And when that waveform moves through us really strongly, it'll make us shake because that's the shape of the wave, is this pulsing quality. But I also discovered that animals, when they feel afraid, they exhibit the same vibrational signature, or even plants. That book, The Secret Life of Plants, where they were hooking plants up to polygraph machines and determining that they were having emotional responses that were trackable. And so I discovered that plants even feel fear the same way we do. So there is this universal vibrational language that all of nature communicates in. And it's a very true language. And it's the same for all of us. Vibes don't lie. And I've had the good fortune of, just because of so much immersion in it, really becoming incredibly fluent in it. And I can listen to someone's signal and determine so much. Like, there was a fellow who was at the event that we were at, a chiropractor, and I just put a weighted fork on his chest, and I was just feeling, it's like LiDAR. It's sending a pulse in, and then you get this pulse back, and it has all of this information in it. And I felt this energy that was like very excited at the beginning and then burning itself out. And so I said to him, like, you get really enthusiastic about things and then you jump right in and then you exhaust yourself and burn yourself out. And he said, I exactly do that. And he said, how can you tell? And I said, I feel that story in the vibrational information in your tissues.
So I've had the pleasure of having sessions with you and also some of your trainees. And I know that there are emotional signatures, but like you said, there's also literal information. So information about ancestors, about dynamics with, my family of origin, about, current versus past versus future concerns. And this is in reference to this extraordinary map, for lack of a better word, that you've created to crystallize these patterns that you must have seen over many, many iterations of the folks that you've worked with. And I also know that you're a very gifted channel. So how much of Biofield Tuning would you say at this point? Because you train a lot of folks, right? So this isn't just the Eileen show. It's not just your magical talents, which you undoubtedly have. It's something that you can validate, pass on, and systematize. So how much but maybe it is that people who are attracted to be trained by you also have this gift, right? So how much of Biofield Tuning would you say is opening almost like a clairvoyant sense so that you can receive this specific information beyond just, there's sadness you're dealing with, there's, frustration, whatever it is, emotionally. And how much of it is just literally hearing a sound from the fork and knowing what it means when it's off the left hip versus, the right ear?
So it's both. Basically, my mapping of the biofield was something that happened between 2006 and 2010 was when I really did the most of it. Because from 1996 to 2006, I just worked right over the body. And then in 2006, I discovered that there was stuff going on in the atmosphere around the body. And so I started exploring that in this sonar kind of way. And much to my amazement, I found this whole territory, this whole anatomy and physiology in this sort of tonal landscape that's hidden in plain view. And over the course of those 4 years, through insight and pattern recognition, I realized that this anatomy and physiology was really the same from person to person. Just like our interior anatomy is pretty much mostly the same from person to person, so is our exterior anatomy. And so when students learn it, they get the map. And so the process of tuning is very simple. It's very easy for people to learn. And I discovered, because when I first started teaching people, because the way it came through to me was auditorily. But in the course of teaching, I discovered that most people were actually kinesthetic as a primary pathway of perception. And so anybody can slowly move a tuning fork through the field and feel in their fingertips when the vibration changes. And when you actually encounter a sense of resistance or what seemed to me like mass. And it's a sort of an odd thing to be moving a tuning fork slowly towards someone. You're about 3 feet away and it stops. And you're feels like you're bumping up against someone. So you don't need to know what that is. You just look at the biofield anatomy map and you plot it on the map. And you can look at it and it's very equidistant. So this is the biofield, right? It's a torus. It has a outer boundary, a double layer plasma membrane that keeps you sort of as a bubble. You have a central channel down the middle. And as we go through our days and we see and smell and touch and feel and think and have experiences, these are all electrical impulses in the body. And they're all like little needles that are reading out whatever our vibe is in all of these different departments. And then that information gets laid down in our magnetic field in standing waves. And as we generate it, it moves away from us. So if this is the field of someone who's 40, I'm going to find information that was generated when they were 20 about halfway through. So the field extends about 6 feet away from our bodies in every direction. So I'm going to find your memories that you generated when you were 20 about 3 feet away from you. And then there's specific areas, like every time you have a sad experience or feel sad, that information gets laid down off the left shoulder. There's file drawers for different emotions and then different body parts that are affected by the imbalances of particular emotional or mental sort of states of mind. So you don't need to be intuitive because I've already figured all that out. You just need to be attuned to your basic senses in order to determine, I've hit a memory, right? Because we've been told our memories are inside our brain. But what I found was that they're in our field, which is this is a very different model. In this model, your body is inside your mind. right? And I would say your biofield, your electrical system, is what we call your conscious mind. It's your subconscious mind. It's where all your memories are stored. And because they're stored in the field around you, they become the lens that you look at life through, and why people get reactive or triggered from external events, because they're passing through the filter of distortions in our own field. I will say, though, that in the very beginning, Kelly, when I was starting to map the field and I would hit a distortion in a specific area, I felt like I had a little mail slot in the back of my head, like right at the top of my spine. MAIL slot, like that are indoors. And I'd hit this wonky area, and all of a sudden the mail slot would open and it would drop in a note that said something like sadness, age 10. And I don't know where that came from. You know what I mean? Like, that's one of those mysteries I'm content to not know. And then I would say to the person, did something really sad happen when you were 10? And they would be like, oh yeah, that's when so-and-so died and it was da 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 da. And they tell me this whole story. So my initial mapping of the field, when I had no idea what I was doing, did really come from guidance of some sort or another that was incredibly accurate. And it was that guidance that allowed me to figure out what was going on. And that same information, that same source of information is really available to anyone and everyone who does the work. And most people, once they get over feeling comfortable with the logistical part of the execution and can really relax into the space, most people find that that kind of guidance or insight drops in for them as well. But you can totally do the work without any of that too.
Yeah. It reminds me of family constellation in that way, where there's, I love the mail slot, right? Where there's things being delivered through the mail slot that are pretty inexplicable. And it's a combination of an insight and a body-based delivery, like a felt, sensation-based delivery of information. And it seems, at least to my formerly quite skeptical worldview, it seems like, oh, well, there's only certain people who have that gift. And it's probably really hard to validate it. And, who knows if they're bullshitting, kind of a thing. And in my direct experience, there aren't really many qualifications, anyone can go into a family constellation field for the most part. You can be eating McDonald's every day or a raw vegan, animal activist. It doesn't matter if you have the intention to open yourself to the delivery of this information. So I hear what you're saying. And I also imagine that your trainees are very grateful that you have mapped out, to the extent that you have, which you even provide in your books. I mean, it's readily available what you have decoded, and it's such an amazing system. I want to double click though on what you said about the information in the field, like this idea of thoughts in the field, because I actually just interviewed Joe Dispenza and talked about this direct quote from somebody in my community, and I've shared it in our group. But in summary, it's this gal who was sharing that she was born with fingers missing on her hand, and her mother, while she was pregnant with her, had a saw accident and lost the same exact fingers on her hand. And there's more to the story, but that to me, that single example, you were the first person I thought of when I read this. I mean, I was truly astounded, again, because I'm still navigating the material and the invisible in my own process, and because of my deep conditioning. This is the kind of proof that I have needed, to be exposed to, that says there's no quote unquote genetics. There's not even really direct teratogenicity. There's no way to explain that phenomenon, that single instance. This is a woman in my community. She's a real human being, right? It wasn't like a meme on social media. And that single instance defies any sort of material explanation about how information is actually transferred, if not some kind of energetic field. Like, how the hell else would you explain something like that? Right? And so I know that you have your own examples of the literal information, right? So it's not even necessarily just kind of like ways of being and habits of personality. It can be literal information that is held in your field that translates to the form of your experience. So I wonder if we could maybe start to just sort of talk about like your perspective on what, health is, like what even is so-called pathology, what even is going on according to you and the Biofield Tuning perspective when somebody has symptoms, right? Like where does Biofield Tuning fit in a landscape of perspectives from the conventional to German New Medicine to homeopathy to psychic and emotional underpinnings or spiritual, or maybe it's diet or, right? Like what is the primary explanation for what people are struggling with in the physical realm? So I'm talking like hair loss, diarrhea, joint pain, and then we could get into sort of the sort of mental, behavioral, emotional realms. But how would you kind of summarize what the perspective encompasses?
Well, before I do that, I want to tell you that my husband's half sister, his mother, when she was pregnant with him, was bit by a dog, and pretty severely. And her daughter was born with a scar in the exact same spot.
Yes, you shared this. Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. You see what?
Yeah. Like what? And it makes me think of the Biggleson's holographic blood. I think that definitely plays a role because I've seen people's scars from being bit by dogs as holograms in the blood. And so it becomes part of the information field that the baby is developing in. But I would say, nobody's ever really given pushback to me on this, Kelly. So if you are inclined, please do. But after many years of working with many, many thousands of people, I've come to the conclusion that most of what we suffer from, really any ailment you can think of, is actually tension-based. It's patterns of tension in the physiology, in the fascia, in the field that are inhibiting flow. And because if everything is relaxed in the way that it's supposed to be and tight in the way that it's supposed to be, our bodies are designed for very high levels of functioning. And what gets in the way of the flow of information, of blood, of lymph, of the garbage being taken out, of the nutrients being delivered, all of that is patterns of tension. And what Biofield Tuning fundamentally does, the only promise that I make to people is that it helps you to relax. That's it. It helps you whatever, trauma response, patterns of holding you've got in your gut from being bottle fed instead of breastfed, from your alcoholic father storming around the house and you contracting and pulling in. I know for me, I grew up with 5 older siblings that were 6 to 12 years older than me. And I was under constant attack as a child. I was tickled. Got Indian rope burn. I got rat tail flicks. I got camel bites. I mean, you name the claw was always coming after me. And so my whole fascia physiology body went like this. I ended up with Raynaud's syndrome, cold hands and feet. I mean, and a million other minor things that were all a consequence of patterns of tension. So my healing journey has been one of going, layer by layer and releasing these patterns of tension so that then I can expand into my potential. Basically, everybody has all of this potential, which is literally electric potential. And I think so much of personal growth and all the things that people do is because they're trying to access that potential. But if you're all bound up with all of these patterns and layers of tension, you're not going to be able to. So another part that I think creates huge restriction and issues in people was I started to discover that when I got down into the kernel of every dysfunction in anybody, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, relational, there was some kind of belief that they weren't worthy. And when we don't think that we're worthy, we're going to create a pattern of tension that's going to restrict our ability to experience that part of ourselves, to experience that vitality. So many people think that they want to be sexy and healthy and rich and, all their badass self. But very few people feel worthy of stepping into that in totality.
Yes, yes, and yes. So I've heard you also talk about the term coherence, right? So would you say that that's the concept that represents the electrical goal is to come into this relax? Because you talk about it as relaxation. I love that that's like, you're not making any claims to cure disease. Just chilling here. And I'd love to talk about, I know that you have witnessed and participated and facilitated outcomes that far surpass what could be described as mere relaxation. But how would you describe this state of coherence? Like how would a body know that it's in that state?
Well, the word coherence means to be in order, to hang together, to make sense. And if you think of yourself as you are a signal, you are a packet of waves and information. That signal is either clear and bright, or it's fuzzy. And I go back to the days when you could dial on the radio and like, here's a radio station and there's static in it. And so you're not getting the full picture or the full sound because the signal isn't clear, or the snow and the TV when we were kids. So coherence is just the signal being really clear. So in Biofield Tuning, what we're aiming to do is to get the noise out of the signal and the resistance out of the flow, so that your electrical signal, your electrical current is flowing and it's not full of crackle and noise and stuff that interrupts that. Because it's your signal that is informing your order, structure, function of your physiology. It's the clarity of your blueprint that the body is referencing as it's in the state of continual reconstruction. So if you've got an area where there's a lot of static, the body is going to struggle to create a clear, coherent form there. It's also the idea that, what I spoke about earlier of experiencing my body as music, that every organ, every rhythm, every system is operating with the same conductor, with the same sheet music, with the same metronome, so that the music that you are is all hanging together, making sense, being clear. And that's the essence of coherence. It's fundamentally just being in really good order. We all know the difference, how we feel stepping into a messy room where there's just stuff everywhere versus a room that's very orderly and tidy, and how it makes you feel. So thinking just about your body either as a musical composition or as just a house or a room, like how orderly or disorderly is it? And if we've had a lot of trauma, then it creates a lot of disorder in our signal and our system. It makes it very hard to maintain order in our environments, order in our lives. Whatever is in disarray energetically is going to show up in our lives, as within, so without. So the chaos, whatever chaos you might be experiencing, whether it's relationally, whether it's out driving, wherever you go, there you are. And you are having the experience of whatever your signal is, right? So there's this saying about how your frequency attracts your experience. I would make that even simpler and say your frequency is your experience.
I imagine you don't believe in accidents.
No.
Injuries, accidents as being random events that befall our reality.
Yeah. I have a girlfriend who, this is a great illustration of that. I have a girlfriend who at the time, single mom, running a massage school, had a massage practice, and was also a adjunct professor at 2 colleges. And she called me one day and she said, Eileen, I was out hiking and I fell. Guess where I injured myself? And I said, your right shoulder. And she said, yep. And that is the right shoulder. This is caretaking, accommodating, putting everyone else's needs ahead of your own. She had gone really out of balance in that part of her field. And so that is where the injury happened. And I've seen this again and again and again and again, that you get injuries in the place wherever your field was not coherent.
So there's one tool that you can find lying out and about in my house any time of day, and that is the sonic slider. It's a highly calibrated tuning fork developed by my friend and bioenergetic and sound healing pioneer, Eileen McKusick. It delivers a deep, penetrating, very specific vibration that tones your body from the inside out. I think of it as like harmonizing and organizing anything that I apply it to. So it works on fascia, lymph, and subtle energy, of course. and it unwinds tension, it boosts circulation, vitality, and coherence in your electric body, which, by the way, is where it's at, in case you haven't heard. I use it on my face, actually, to lift and brighten, and I use it on my joints if I have any post-workout inflammation or pain, and then also on my midline to harmonize my nervous system. And every night before bed, I vibrate it on my third eye just because it feels good. So this is one of those tools that bridges science and soul in the way that only Eileen knows how to. It's super simple to use. You literally just tap it and then gently hold it anywhere that you want to apply it. And it feels amazing. So use code Kelly Brogan at biofieldtuningstore.com for 15% off your first purchase. And it also happens to be one of my favorite gifts to give people. Enjoy. I have a client who has a son who's an athlete who would have experienced like a concussive injury in a career history as an athlete of very, very, very few injuries at all, right? And he would experience like a loss of consciousness concussion on the anniversary of his parents, so her and her partner's separation, annually.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
And it took 3 years of this happening to put together that who knows what the explanation is. It gets almost poetic where you're like, the body is inducing a forgetting, right? Of the pain of that experience. And it's totally subconscious because he was pretty chill with the whole transition. It's so extraordinary to begin to decode on this level. Yeah. And to think that it's the random universe perspective, right? To think that accidents just unfortunately happen or injuries are just sort of like, bad luck, bad timing is missing out on potentially some of the powerful reflection of yourself and your subconscious or whatever you would term it, right? These underlayers of influence that want to be seen and appreciated.
Exactly. They want to be seen and appreciated. And that's what it is, because your body is actually trying to support you by creating these opportunities for you to get yourself in better order.
I know that part of the getting into better order can be rendered through the tuning forks themselves, right? That applying, if I'm using the terms correctly, like a harmonic resonance to the field of the body can educate, inform, imprint this coherence. And I also know that I feel like our sort of singing journeys dovetailed in some way, but that you've also opened to exploring the role of song and toning maybe in offering that coherence to the body. So like, how do you think, like, what are the tools that we can use, that Biofield Tuning uses, that your approach uses to induce that? Maybe induce is too aggressive a word, but inspire that coherence.
I think one of the fundamental consequences of relaxation is that you breathe more deeply and freely. And in the electric health model, we are getting most of the electric juice that our bodies run on from our breath, from breathing in the plasma atmosphere. You can go for weeks without food, days without liquid. You can only go a few minutes without breath, and then that's the end. And so that shows us how vital breath is for being alive. So any kind of breath work that helps to deepen and widen and soften and expand your breathing is going to be really helpful. Just noticing what your breathing is doing. Noticing so many people have a tendency to subconsciously hold their breath, tighten their diaphragm, tighten their shoulders, and then overthink. And that is going to make you exhausted by 3:00 in the afternoon, just completely wiped out. And so that's just something to become mindful of. When you catch yourself not breathing, check your patterns of tension and very mindfully unlock your diaphragm, unlock your shoulders, take a really big breath, settle into your body, and then take a few breaths that are like that. This practice alone, simplest, freest, easiest thing to do to just boost your overall vitality and self-awareness. Coming into sound, humming is a super useful practice. Just again, for self-soothing, for introducing a coherent tone. You can hum in your face, but you can practice moving the hum all around your body. in the work that I do in the Sing the Body Electric work with Isaac and Toril Corin, we have 42 different sounds that resonate in specific areas of the body. And is the tone for bones. And our bones are crystalline structures that actually store electricity. Not that long ago, I came across this information that said when we're under stress and we're running on adrenaline, it's not just being produced by your adrenals, it's also pulling electricity from your bones. And so osteoporosis, any kind of bone breakdown, is a consequence of running under stress for too long. So thinking about things that increase bone density, dancing, bouncing, you hum and bounce a little bit, just that alone can get more energy going in your system. Ever since I started, I moved from the chemical mechanical lens of health, where I was really struggling to solve all the problems that I had. And I had been studying self-help and human potential and all different kinds of approach to health from 1987 until 2009. And I'd spent thousands and thousands of dollars, thousands of hours, and I was not fit. I was not rich. I was not happy. I'm like, this is not working. But then I discovered plasma and ether. I discovered syntropy, which is the opposite of entropy. I discovered levity, sound waves fall upwards. And when I started looking at health and life through this electric lens with these additional states of matter, it was there that I found the resources I needed to solve the problems I was suffering from. Also in 2010, I started training my first group of students and I started receiving tuning. And I would say that made all the difference. I mean, it's definitely started me on this path where I was finally able to get where I want to go. And I think so many people who are on the healing path encounter this frustration with like trying to do all the things and you're still not getting anywhere. And it can be really frustrating. But I think the biofield, the electrical system, and the electric health lens, coming back to what we spoke at the beginning, seeing everything as vibrations and fluids ultimately is really what it is. It makes everything so much easier. It gives you the tools you need to really start to actually achieve the things that you're trying to do.
And we also are colleagues with Veda Austin and others who feel passionately about, and Tom's written books about it, about the nature of water as a structured gel that holds information and can be programmed with thoughts and emotions. So I imagine, I know you personally to be somebody who effortlessly views reality with a playful energy and a light energy. I love what you said about the levity of this field of it's the science of it, it's just so profound. And so when you bring that to bear to the waters of your body, I imagine it dovetails so beautifully, with your work, and it just starts to make sense out of so much that is otherwise inexplicable. And I'd love to just touch on, before we do a little demo, I'd love to touch on some of the outcomes that you've enjoyed and your practitioners have enjoyed, because I imagine you went into experiencing this and teaching this just with this curiosity, right? Like this childlike mind that says, let's learn about the nature of this human body and what actually is it? What are these bones? What are these, teeth? What's actually happening in the gut? And then you started to see, people come into this work and walk out of it with resolution of complaints and, as you were saying, even in your own life, problems that were never even anticipated, I imagine, as to be possible. So I'd love for you to share just a little bit about the scope of what you've seen come through this work beyond just relaxation.
Well, we have actually peer-reviewed research, which is kind of exciting, that we did study. Initially, we did a feasibility study with 15 people who all came in with clinical anxiety. And they all received 3 virtual biofield tuning sessions over Zoom. And everybody came out without clinical anxiety anymore. So anxiety is rhythmic. It's a rhythm in the body. And the tuning fork is like a metronome. And so it's like a biofeedback device. It's like a mirror, and it shows the body what it's doing, right? I don't know that I have a seed in my teeth until I look in a mirror, and then I'm like, oh, look at that. And then I can correct it. So it's the same thing with the body. It doesn't necessarily have awareness of how it's out of order, especially if it's been something that's going on for a long time, until it gets a reflection. So the tuning fork acts like a mirror. It acts like a metronome. And then it acts like a magnet, which allows us to adjust the magnetic field. So in this model, magnetic fields guide and inform electric current. So if you have pain in your shoulder, and that might be too much current running through that wire, we're going to find the associated magnetic field of that excess electric current. And the tuning fork, a vibrating tuning fork, develops magnetic properties in the bioplasma, that is your field. And so we're able to literally do adjustments within the magnetic field, which then change the way electricity is flowing through the body. So with the anxiety study, because we had such dramatic outcomes, we were able to raise like $300,000. And last year we did another really big study with 100 people. 65 people received 5 Biofield tuning sessions virtually, which is completely life-changing for people to have that many. And then we had a control group. So we're in the process of collating that data, and that will all be submitted for peer review later this year. So we're doing the actual research. We're not just going, oh, well, clinically this has happened. But certainly anxiety and fears and phobias respond exceptionally well. Pain responds exceptionally well, especially psychosomatic pain. And a lot of pain really is emotional, mental, electric. There's no necessary pathology there, but there is an imbalance in the electromagnetic field. And then when we adjust it, the pain goes away. Depression is tonal. It's having a tone in your inner music that's like, and we all know that feeling, those of us who've been depressed, just like you are an instrument that is out of tune. You just need that string tightened. And very often with mild to moderate depression, we can lift you up so that you're no longer tonally expressing in a flat way. We've got you more into that middle range. I've had a lot of success with what you might call bipolar. People are running high, fast frequencies. They're running low, slow, heavy, and they're totally missing their mid-range. And so we settle down what's too high and fast. We bring up what's too low and slow. Sounds like an adaptogen in the body, and that it helps it to regulate and find that sweet spot of expression. So a big part of what I would say I treat is stuckness. A lot of people come looking for help because they're stuck. Their conscious mind wants one thing. Their subconscious mind keeps acting out something else. That's all wiring. And one of the things I call myself is a bioelectrician. I go in and rewire the way energy is flowing along pathways in your body, kind of reset you back to neutral or your factory settings so that you have access to that gap where choices get made instead of going into the default response because you're just flowing along pathways that are established. So I've helped many, many people to get unstuck and to realize their creative potential. And that's super satisfying because, we're all really brilliant and beautiful and amazing and gifted like everyone is. And we all know that, but most people don't believe it. And they also don't necessarily have access to it because tracks that get laid down early, family patterns, get in our way. And we really do need help sort of shifting our wiring so that we can then expand into what we know is there.
That's beautiful. So I would love to offer a little bit of that help to those who are listening, because it's extraordinary to me that this translates remotely. Because I have had, in-person experiences, and I've worked with you even over a computer, and it's just the moment we're in, right? Where there's this blurring of some kind of, for better or for worse, of some kind of seeming boundaries. So we can translate together, for those listening, just a little taste of what it might feel like to be in the tuning realm with you. And I wonder if you're down for that.
Yeah, I got my forks right here. Just to kind of explain a little bit about how that works. Okay, so if this is your body, right? But your memories are out here. So you are outside of your body. Where do you end? And you could say you end at this plasma boundary, but you don't really, because we are all embedded in the ether. We are all just little nodes within the ether, and we are all of it. we are as infinite as reality is. So we are everywhere. So if I'm tuning you, you are right here in front of me. So that is one way that it works. And another way that it works is, have you ever watched a video on YouTube of someone singing a beautiful song and it made you cry? Like, how did that work? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sound, and it moves us. Sound moves us, whether it's a recording, whether it's through Zoom, whether it's live. We're moved by sound. Our electromagnetic bodies are moved by electromagnetic sound. And even though we're told sound is just a mechanical longitudinal wave, it's actually much, much more than that. A sound is both transverse, longitudinal, electromagnetic, moves spirally and spherically, and contains complex geometric information. So there's a lot more to sound, and some paper that I'm working on right now, like leveling up our understanding of what sound really is. So there's a lot going on. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use just a few forks just to kind of feel. The sound has a way of sort of finding its way into whatever might be tense. Let's just say, this is just a few minutes of listening and feeling into the forks and just seeing if and how they might induce a little bit of relaxation into the system. And then bring in more light, because the more that we let go of the tension and restriction, the more we become filled with light. And it is our light body, our spark of God, that is who we really are. When we're all clamped down in tension, there isn't space for that light to flow through us. What we're really just asking ourselves to do is bring more of that fundamental life force and divinity into circulation in our inner experience. Yeah. Okay. So this first fork I'm going to use is 144 hertz. And let's just close our eyes and just listen and see what we notice as we activate it. So I'm going to tune into the group field, Kelly, of everyone who will ever listen to this podcast. Just going to invite every single one of those people to be present. And we're going to be listening to the group field. Okay, I'm going to do one more of this frequency. Good. So with each one of those strikes, like, I get different information kind of comes through, right? And I didn't feel the need to narrate it in that moment, but just tell me what you noticed just with that little bit. Just what did you notice in your body?
I went from, first of all, my cat just got very excited. He's been dead asleep the whole conversation.
Love forks. They do.
It felt like it went from an initial, almost like a warbly, like I became aware of my own tension. I guess that's the best way to put it. And then over the course of the, whatever it was, 4 or 5 sounds of it, it started to feel very light. Yeah. Very, almost like sweet.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. It's giving you a reflection of your own tension. And then as we start to let go of the tension is heavy. And as we release tension, everybody, pretty much without exception, what everybody says after they receive a tuning is, I feel lighter. Feel lighter. I've let go of the whatever I'm burdened by, whatever stories, whatever emotional baggage I'm carrying around, and it just sort of lighten up, right? And it is that simple. I feel lighter. And so, okay, so that was the 144, which can really reflect some of those patterns of tension. So now I'm going to do the 174, then we'll just see what this one does. We'll see if the cat comes back. Yes, the cat came back.
like distracted. He's meowing. He's like so into this. It's so
Yep, definitely. We hear this over and over again. I'm always being sent pictures of like cats and dogs watching whatever I'm doing, and like, and they're just so drawn to it.
amazing. And now he's like on his back on all fours. Amazing.
Yeah. So that one, right? Same kind of journey, right? It starts off at a little reflective. Like I became aware of some tension in my shoulder about halfway through. And then by the time we got to the end of that, like generally a breath wants to arise and something wants to let go. Yeah. And then I've got one more. This is my newest fork. This is 222 hertz. So all my other forks are forks of doing, especially the 144. Like the 144 is like, let me show you all the things that are wrong with you. I'm going to reflect them. Whereas the 222 is, I love you just the way you are. And this is more a fork of being. It's a very sweet tone. It's very bell-like. So let's just listen to a few of these and see what we notice with that. Good. And one more. Good. And I'm actually hearing that was not the last one. I have to end on a different one just because I can feel it. All right. This is 528. Do just a couple of these. So just see where this goes, what it wants to brighten. So this is like a finishing fork, a brightening fork. Good. Okay, so everybody take a nice big breath. We're all the way down into the belly, really filling up the lungs. Really press that breath out as much as you can. And then exhale with like an ah sound. Yeah. Good. All right. What do you notice?
I felt that last one a lot in my belly, whereas the prior one, I felt almost like effervescent in my chest. I mean, so amazing. And I know literally nothing about hertz anything. Like I don't know nothing about, the sort of, I don't know, the oral resonance of these, I guess. So yeah, I just feel like I even can feel my eyelids like softer.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's softening, lightening, opening, brightening. It's not super high tech, but it's tangible. And when you're on the table for an hour and we're finding all of these places where you've got knots in your wiring and sort of teasing them out, you just leave in a better state of flow. Now, it can bring up emotions because a lot of these knots are like sounds that we've never made and they're frozen and stuck. And we've been taught abstinence only when it comes to emotions in most of the families we grew up in. So sometimes relaxing can bring a flood of old bottled up emotions out, or old symptoms can surface. And that can be uncomfortable. So for some people, I think why people don't heal is because they're just really afraid to feel. But they really pass. And then you feel better on the other side. And it's cumulative. The more you do, the lighter and lighter and lighter you become, but you also become more and more grounded at the same time. And that's a really good feeling, to be really grounded, but really light at the same time. It just makes life easier than being burdened by all of the knots in our system.
And I know, again, from knowing you personally, that this informs a worldview that is far more flexible and encompassing and resilient. I know that you are not somebody who lives by a lot of dogma while you also have open eyes, right? So that you can hold a lot of what we explore together, even as colleagues, in terms of the veiled realities of what we are presented. And you can also, laugh and have a good time and move on with your day, right? That it's almost becomes a way to dance with reality when you're foregrounding this coherence, when you're recognizing that the tension is the pathology, that's where these kinks in the system begin to translate into form. And if we can avoid it, why don't we?
Exactly. I think resilience is really the key word. If we're kind of taking that concept of immunity and throwing it out the window, what do we replace it with? And it really is resilience. It is how adaptable are you to whatever you're encountering? How strong is your signal? How strong is the outer boundary of your field? How much movement do you have so that you can just kind of bounce when stressors come instead of being flattened by them? So I think that bringing ourselves into a resilient place, life's going to keep being stressful, but can we respond resiliently to it?
So you have a bunch of these tools available, and one might imagine that you need, to be in your training program, which of course I recommend to anyone who feels a little yes inside, or to work directly with a practitioner. But I've heard you time and time again recommend that you can just mess around. So I personally have a sonic slider with a boot, it's called. And if you go to the shop, we'll link, of course, in show notes. If you go to the shop, you'll see what I'm talking about. And I just mess around with it. I just run it over my body. I actually keep it in my drawer or by my bedside. And often, like before I go to bed, I'll vibrate it across my forehead and then I'll pray, I'll do my thing and enter into my, my sleep moment with that as like a custodian, an energetic custodian. And there's all sorts of things you can just sort of explore and play around with. So I wonder if you can, if somebody's sort of like, I wonder how I could start to experience this. Would you just recommend that they get a hold of their own fork and start to explore?
Yeah, the sonic slider is a really good introduction because it's super pleasing and it's easy to use and you can just play with it. It comes with 6 videos on how to use it, but people have figured out so many ways to use it, and it's great for first aid. It helps get rid of itchy bug bites. It has so many uses and is very beloved. In fact, cats love it. Have you tried using it on your cat?
I have. Yes, I have. It's one of my tools.
Yeah, cats and dogs really love the sonic slider. So it's just a good starting point. And you can even with the sonic slider practice moving it through the field because you can feel when you hit a wonky area. And it's kind of an exciting thing, when you're like going through the field, all of a sudden it starts vibrating more in your hand and you're like, whoa, the signal changed and I can feel that, right? It takes something that seems intangible and makes it really real. So that's just a good starting point. The field combing, learning the language of vibration, the 174 and the 144 are great for field combing. Although, that's something you kind of need some instruction with. Although I do in my book, Tuning the Human Biofield, there's a whole chapter on how to actually do a biofield tuning adjustment. So that information is out there. It's in a $13 book on Amazon. It has the map, the biofield anatomy map in it. That's also a good place to start. Certainly seeing a practitioner, getting a series. I get like 3 sessions with somebody, whether it's in person or at a distance. And then I have lots of recordings too. My personal practice became so busy that I couldn't manage it. And I was in the middle of nowhere in the mountains of Vermont, in this poor rural conservative area. And I started booking 4 or 5 months out, even though I was seeing 5 people a day, because it was so effective, physical, mental, emotional, whatever. So I had to figure out a different way to treat people. And I started making these recordings, which I didn't know would work. I made a bunch of free ones. I'm like, let me know if these work. And people are like, they work. And I was like, okay, there you go. So there's lots of those. There's a bunch of free ones there too, to try them out first. And then, for anybody who's a provider of any kind, this work is so gratifying to do because it really very often, not always, not for everything, but produces pretty immediate results that are tangible. And so as a provider, it's really satisfying and very fascinating. Like it's endlessly fascinating. I still learn something new like every day that I do it. So for people who love to learn, it's great like that. And so we have virtual and in-person classes, if that is, and I find very often when people hear about this, like if they're called to it, like that calling drops in pretty clear. And so if you're feeling that, then follow it and you won't be disappointed.
Totally. Well, I am so, so, so grateful that you have invested the decades of passion and courage. You may not experience it as that, but I know, how this kind of work and any of the disruptive suggestions that we are making to how to view the human body and human health. I know that you've experienced your fair share of pushback and skepticism. And I'm just so grateful that you are an ambassador, that you are a priestess in this realm, and that you're bringing this not only to practitioners, to the collective, but to the individual, to your own personal relationship with your body and how it extends beyond what you may be able to directly touch and see. So you are just an extraordinary woman. I'm so grateful.
Thank you, Kelly. Yes, like there's definitely hasn't been easy. There's been a lot of skepticism and pushback, but it's gotten easier over the years, and especially in the last few years. So I would say the paradigm is changing, and people are more and more open-minded. And I even ever since the telepathy tapes came out, it's been easier for me to talk to people about this. Just in the culture at large, that wall of between paradigms has gotten a lot smaller and a lot easier to break through. And more people just get it. It's just physics. There's nothing supernatural about it. It's all just physics and science we already understand. And so the skepticism is getting less and less, which is great for everybody.
Becoming a bit more coherent every day as a collective, perhaps.
Yes, I think so.
Thanks, Eileen.
All right. Thank you, Kelly.